it. That's how you do it. Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out. Let people know we've gone live. If you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I have been trying to mix it up, understanding that I am somebody who needs different ingredients. I'm not somebody who's just going to be content in one landscape, in one experience, in the same conversations, around the same people. You know, I believe lots of things have attributed to me being here, but I think that is one of the qualities that is, much needed, I think, when you're making, I don't know, this kind of life for yourself. The way that we kind of wake up to some ideas and we start munching on things. Sometimes we become a little bit compulsive in that. But sometimes I think it's just in the urgency that we feel, right? And not just the urgency that something's going to happen in the moment, but the urgency that what we've got to bring to the table is important. It's worthwhile. It matters, right? I'd be a little bit disappointed to think that, we put in all this work. Well, I did it for myself, right? So it'd only be a little bit of a disappointment. But to find that all that work that I put in wouldn't offer up something that could help us all in the end. Last week we were talking about change. All week we talked about change, and there was a little scribble note that I had made in my notes because I thought it would be a really good topic to talk about, especially when we were looking about how we get ourselves into certain situations, how we get ourselves into certain relationships, how our lives work out in certain ways. And, how easily it could have been for me not to have made it to this point, like tonight, like right now, having this conversation. Yesterday, right, I was a little bit disappointed. I yapped away for like over an hour last night, and YouTube gave me 8 minutes of my live. I was disappointed, but then again, just in the moment, because whatever that was, it was a signal that, that maybe things, when I say that I'm tidying up the loose ends, that I'm cleaning things up, that I really do need to pay attention a little bit harder, that maybe I'm too comfortable in my conversations. But I'm out there taking lessons myself. I'm listening in on conversations. I'm sitting in the conversations in all actuality because I am a visual worker when it comes to those lessons that I need to take in because I need to feel out a truth for myself. Hello, Eugene. How are you doing tonight? I am doing absolutely amazing. Doing a little bit of entrepreneurship today. I've been listing a lot of stuff. My place is stuffed. I always thought I'm going to open up a secondhand store and my own little business. And I thought, you know what? Why not just save all that overhead, all those square footage fees, right? All that business licensing and just list it online, list it in Marketplace and Kijiji and see what you can do. And you know what? I haven't worked in almost 2 months now. Has it been 2 months? I haven't worked in 2 months now, and I'm doing okay. I haven't even dipped into my car savings yet. I am shocked. I am shocked in that. I am. But I am grateful because that would be so amazing if those funds could actually go towards that vehicle that I believe I so desperately need. If I don't need it just because I need it because I need it, right? Because there are certain things in my life that make me smile, right? That make everything else that I'm doing worthwhile, right? Because it's no skin off my back. It's a whistle while you work. It's looking out the window while you're staying productive at the desk, right? It's that little bit of multitasking. I understand multitasking now is not such a great thing. I always kind of knew it a little bit, being the multitasker that I was, but I multitasked for something that it could only work, right? And that was to keep my job. So whenever I went into a job, I would always learn every position, right? So that I wouldn't have to worry about that roof over my head. Okay, you guys, let's take a minute. Eugene distracted me, and now Dave is going to distract me. Hi, Dave. Are you still planning for the Jeep? No, the Jeep is not my dream vehicle anymore. I like the Navigator, right? I really enjoyed driving the Infinity this year. But yeah, the Jeep is a beautiful vehicle to drive, but to set it up as an RV, it wouldn't make it my dream vehicle. It wouldn't be comfortable enough for me. And even though from now going forward, I will be taking my pop up tent with me when I go camping, I'll no longer be setting the vehicle up like an RV. There will be occasions that I may have to pull over to the side of the road, take a quick nap or something. And, that room to do so would be absolutely amazing. So, no. In the short answer, no, the Jeep is off the table. Well, any kind of vehicle in this moment is kind of off the table, but I am working towards that. And, it's just going to come to me in the most amazing, spectacular way, right? I am determined and optimistic that things that I want to come to me too, right? And a really nice, big, big, big SUV would be amazing. But we could go bigger, 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 bigger and go up maybe a B class RV. Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? Right? I would take two jobs just to even just pay the gas on that thing, right? Setting myself up for my retirement. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit about next week. But let's just bring it back in the moment of what I did want to talk about. Last week we were talking about change, and I made it sound like it was absolutely amazing. There's no movement forward unless we make that choice and then directly get into the action, right? To help that change ignite. But as highly sensitives, as empaths, quite often, right, we dig our heels in. It's hard sometimes. Sometimes we need that little bit of push. Sometimes we need a pep talk. Sometimes we need a friend who's just going to cheerlead us on in what we want to do, right? It's unfortunate that we have these traits, but we have these traits. And again, if you're anything like me, you're going to adapt and conquer. You're going to find another way, or you're going to overcome some of these issues that makes it so that we dig our dig our heels in. Bring it back to the main tree, Cindy. So again, I'm talking about change. I wanted to say change is not always for the better. So it takes courage, it takes bravery, it takes knowing and willing to do the right thing, right? And sometimes in that pushback, sometimes in that, you're right. Sometimes it's in that chokehold, right? Lots of times it was like that, and then you're just tight. You just can't do anything. And sometimes we're trying to bring about change in our life because, well, we feel guilty and shame because we're just not capable of doing anything. And then we try to bring that change, and then it just everything falls apart. And you take that as a signal that you're not supposed to bring change in your life. It was just the frame of mind, the state of your life, that because you felt bad, because you felt the guilt and the shame, there was no way that it was going to work, right? It's like going on a diet. If you're not ready to go on a diet, you're not going to lose any weight. You're going to be off that diet in a moment. You have to be ready to quit smoking. You just can't go to bed at night, say, that was my last cigarette, and then wake up in the morning, and then that's your last cigarette. It doesn't work that way. On occasion, those cold turkeys do happen, but then you're in that position where you're cranky and you're tired and you're in a lot of discomfort, and you're bringing everybody into that discomfort with you, right? And again, you're making it difficult to overcome something, and that change that's coming into your life might not be good. It might be good. It might not just feel good in the moment, but pretty much guaranteed it's not going to feel good, right? We are highly sensitive. We're empaths, right? We don't like change. We don't like to move in what we're not sure of, what we can't see in the future, right? And we'll fill in the blanks ourselves in that fortune telling that we do. And oh my goodness, I have made so many mistakes in that overthinking and in that fortune telling and in that trying to figure out the next step or somebody else's next step when I'm only can be in control of my next step. So change is not always good, and it's not always comfortable. And sometimes it is good, but it's still uncomfortable. So we were talking about change last week, and I was saying the era that I grew up in, there was a lot of change going on. I wrote some of them down. They were just really kind of crazy how many things were going on at the same time. The civil rights movement was going on, right? The the space flight, right? There was competition in the space flight going on and getting man to the moon. The Cold War was going on, and that was pretty scary. Not to mention what was going on with the Cuba incident that was going on, right? The one that, well, and then there was consciousness. There was, right, there was peace, love, and right, there was the Beatles and the yogis and the meditation. That all rolled into it. All of this was going on at the same time. But there was one other one, and this is the one that I think that we got wrong. This is the one that I think possibly, and it's okay to make mistakes, but it's in the course correction when we recognize that we have made a mistake, that possibly that, it's our responsibility to jump on it and course correct. But who am I to say, because I only run with the majority, and the majority of women, right, voted for women's lib. And, my mother was a part of that, right? maybe not a willing participant, but she loved working. She loved getting away from her family, and she loved money. She had a good job that paid good money. She worked in hospitals, and you know, it wasn't because she appreciated mothers, women's lib. It was just the way life worked out in our family, right? Not to mention my dad was a compulsive gambler, so my mother ended up being the main breadwinner. My dad had good jobs too. He made good money too, but right, he was a gambler. We all have our coping mechanisms. And you say you don't have any coping mechanisms, right? That would be an untruth because we all have them. We all have handicaps. Some of them are visible, some of them are not visible, right? Lots of them are not visible until they're visible, and they always become visible. Always. It's why I try so hard not to do the fibs, not even the white lies, if I can help it. My dad was big on the white lies. But just let us get back to the women's lib, because this is where I feel that we might have gotten it wrong. You know, I get it. Women feel that, right? They don't have the same rights as men. Well, that's true. But men don't have the same rights as women either, right? Let me just turn my air conditioner off for a moment here. It's just about to cool off again. Um, Men uh, didn't get a lot of the rights that women got, right? Men didn't get to stay home and watch soap operas in the afternoon. In the 60s and 70s, right? Cleaned the house, made dinner, watched soap operas, took care of the kids, meet your husband at the door with the slippers and the martini. My dad was no different. Well, no martini. He would have a cup of tea in one of his fancy teacups, right? But he would have dinner made, and he was the king in his castle. He was the king, right? And then we live in the world that now the queens want to be kings. They want to be the rulers and the emperors, and right? And it's not that they're not capable. That wasn't why, right? But it's in that role playing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, the female has to be in that female role where they have to stay at home and take care of the kids and make dinner and make sure the kids are doing their homework and there's right structure in the family, right? Because those roles can be switched. But the thing is, because of the women's lib, because women had a choice whether or not to be single mothers, right? Whether or not to go to work and leave their kids home with babysitters, or worse yet, a husband that doesn't know anything about taking care of kids, right? This is something that if we want, right, we have to slowly move into it and make it, right, part of the compounding of learning to be able to do those things. And those things are generational, right? The roles have been played between the man and the woman for thousands and thousands, possibly, probably millions of years, because men are just naturally physically bigger than women, stronger than women, right? And because the women are having the babies, of course they're having that initial connection with the baby. So of course they're going to be the main nurturers of the children. That's just going to be natural. Even now, even with women's lib, mothers are still, right, paying attention to those roles. maybe not doing as good as job as they did in the right before the 60s and 70s, but they're getting the job done, right? And that's all. And who's suffering in that? The children. I was a child that grew up in that household, being the oldest of four girls. By 7 years old, I was babysitting my sisters, right? Probably even before then. By 10 years old, I was making my own money. And that was true. Kool-Aid stands, real Kool-Aid stands. We didn't do this thing out in the front yard. We set it up with great big 5-gallon jugs and we go up to the planetarium and wait for the tourist bus to come in. And we just raked it. We just raked money. We like be all cute in our cute little kid outfits with dandelions with elastic bands wrapped around in bundles, and people would just throw money at us because we were so adorable. And we were doing that as 4, 5, 6 years old. We were young. We were too young to be that far away from home, like that far away from home. We were even taking buses by ourselves, right? We were feral children. There wasn't a lot of guidance and direction in the presence or the lack of presence of my parents. When my parents were around, yeah, we all fell into line 100%. But it was in that catering to my father. My father was still king of the castle, even though my mother brought in that main income, right? That she was the breadwinner, that she probably wore the pants. My mother for sure wore the pants, as she called. She called almost every shot, but my dad thought he called every shot, right? And then when my father passed away, my sister swooped in and she thought she called all the shots. It's just the family dynamics. But I'm not looking at the failure in women's liberation just because of my family, because my family is right, it's dynamic. It's not the norm. It doesn't run in the majority, right? But in that majority, the kids hurt. The kids were babysat by their televisions, by their video games. Mothers were working, right, all the time just to keep a roof over their head for their kids. Lots of times when you cut the men off or you divorced them, right, you could set them up, holding them responsible, keeping the law on them, right, getting that alimony. But we hear this phrase deadbeat dad all the time, right? But that's a new terminology. And even though it did happen in the past before the 60s and 70s, just became a little bit more acceptable, didn't it? Right? I think my father stayed with my mother as long as he did because he was afraid, right? Because those were his children. It was his dream to have a family that he thought and was told that he would never be able to have. And yet there it was. There we were. And yeah, us kids were held in threat against my father for sure. You're never going to see the kids again. Oh yeah. I don't even like to go back into those days and those fights and in those horrible, horrible, depleting words that were said to each other. Said all of us to each other, right? But these days these kids are growing up and because they don't have the guidance of both parents, right? A mother can do the very best for their son as they possibly can. But that boy needs their dad, right? Hockey night in Canada, football, baseball, hanging out in the garage, learning how to tinker with cars, right? Learning the responsibility of being a good man of the house by learning how to use a lawnmower and a little bit of house repairs, right? These are a lot of things that the little kids, the little boys are growing up not understanding. The schools are doing their very best with workshops and, right? But it's not enough because by the time those kids get to school, they're so discouraged because they have no good influence. They have no one to look up to as their heroes, right? And it's the norm. When I was in school, I didn't know any divorced parents. None of my friends or any of the school kids, right? You got married and that was it. You were that was your partner for the rest of your life. Nowadays, right? We change partners like we change underwear. And it's causing us a lot of problems. And I do believe, and it's in my opinion, right? I'm not saying this is the way it is because I'm not the expert in this, but in seeing the problems of the world right now, uh, yeah, I have to say that we made some wrong decisions in that because we chose our roles. We chose our roles thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and it worked well, right? Why fix what's not broken? And that's a truth in something that got that kind of running thousands and thousands of years that this worked. Of course, there are problems. There are cultures and traditions that out there that, right, don't treat, right? It's not in the conversations to give that kind of respect in our partnership. But that's where the work goes, right? You don't throw it out the window like throwing out the baby, throwing with the water, right? I heard that yesterday. That's the first time me using that because it's a good one, right? You fix it. And you don't do it in a forcibly way, but you fix it in a way that you're the example for your children. This is what a good partnership looks like. And even if it's not a good partnership, right? Lots of people stay with the kids till they hit 18, right? Before they call it an end to the marriage, just for the fact that they want their children to grow up well rounded, because we all want better by our children. I never had kids myself, but if I did, I would most definitely, no question, want better for my children than what I had for my life. That's not to say it was all bad. There was a lot of good in that crazy, unique, dynamic upbringing that I had, right? And all those amazing characters who were, right, making choices for themselves and felt they were able to make choices for others. But sometimes we do make choices that are not good for the whole. And that's the truth. And I thought, if I talk a little bit about women's liberation, I'm not an expert in it, but enough to maybe generate some thought that maybe, you're sitting out in the stoop and sitting on your rocking chair looking at the stars and got nothing better to do and you got 10 minutes, right? Maybe you could give the topic some consideration, right? Maybe you can have the conversation at the table when you've got your wife and your kids and your grandkids there. What a great topic of conversation because in that evidence of that conversation, somebody could be inspired to say, oh, I'll never be that person, right? I'm going to find the most beautiful wife, beautiful husband, all the most amazing qualities, right? And then there's two. Two heads are better than one, right? And that is a truth sometimes. In that filling up the gaps in those lessons that I didn't get or somebody else didn't get, that partner would be able to fill that hole. And at the same time, there's an opportunity for you to be a spectator and a student in that too, and pick up a few lessons for yourself that you're not so weak, right? In the things that you want to learn, that you want to be independent. There's nothing wrong with being independent, and but but right in that partnership, in making sure that the kid's okay, that is most important. I think, in all honesty, it's why we're here, right? We're creating the best human being we possibly can, and yeah, why fix what's not broke? Now we have to fix it. Okay. Dave says, my mom raised 8 kids. She worked harder than my dad. He worked at the Westinghouse maybe an hour, read a book, ate, napped. Mom paid all the bills, took care of everything, right? But it's in that partnership, because your dad, too, he worked hard. He probably worked so hard. And he probably handed that paycheck to your mom every payday, right? I would think that it would be, right? I haven't had that experience, because I'm not married and I don't have kids. So, in those jobs that I had, all that money was mine and I could do with it the way I wanted to do with it, right? Those small kindnesses you give to friends and family. But other than that, all that money was was mine, right? And I didn't get a lot of those lessons. I'd like to think I was a good wife. I was married, for those of you guys don't know, right? I was with my husband for 8 years. And I'd like to think that I was a good wife, because I wanted to do better by him than what I felt my mother did for my dad, right? I felt my mom loved my dad, right? Right up to the day he passed away. And then everything inside of her just walked out on her, and she was just an empty shell for another 25 years after my father passed away. It was pretty sad, especially when she was so sick, right? It offered up lots of opportunities for me and her to have discussions, opportunities for us to find forgiveness. In the end, we did, right? But yeah, sometimes you can't erase, right, what we didn't get right in those mistakes. It's a right mistake should be able to be made, but we have to course correct on them right away. My mother was a hard worker. My father was a hard worker too. But in that partnership, we survived, the whole family. Because if my mom had to do it by herself, it wouldn't have been fun. And no question, absolutely no question, I would not be here having this discussion with you right now, because I wouldn't have been able to hold up in that household without the relationship of my father. I had my father right till he passed away. I had both my parents. And yes, right, fights were like WWF. Right? It was crazy town. But I tell you, when it was crazy town, there was refuge, right? In one of the partners. If they disagreed, right? I could pick sides, and not just talk about pick sides, but what about the essence of Cindy, the making of Cindy? As much as I'm my father's daughter, I'm my mother's daughter. And if I didn't have my father, what traits would I have picked up? What was the appetizer platter for me? What hope was there for me, right? And I'm just talking about me, but there were 4 of us girls who needed our dad, and we're lucky enough to have our dad. And it wasn't luck, right? But that gratefulness in that little bit of cush, I call it, right? That little bit of comfort in what's uncomfortable. It made it so I got through it, right? I got through it. And not to look at the past and say it could have easily been another story. But I think it's a good idea to appreciate sometimes how easily it could have been a different story. Jibber jabber, jibber jabber. You guys know what I'm like. But I wanted to get that in, right? Because, I change is huge for me. It's one of the biggest words in my deck. I make movement by making choices and putting action in and creating change for myself, right? You wouldn't know it to see where my life is at in the moment, but it's always happening. Change is always happening. And so I'm a big cheerleader for change, but also I have to be honest in letting people know that it does take courage. It does take bravery, right? And it does take a little bit of time to make good choices, right? Not just to run into it, get that action going, make that choice, move towards it. But when you recognize that it's uncomfortable, pay attention. And if you pay attention and you recognize that you made a mistake, that's the best moment to turn around and see if you can make right a wrong, right? There's always an opportunity to make a right out of wrong. I was offered up that gift and I'm taking full advantage of it, right? I'm not a big advocate for women's live, right? You guys know I'm coming back. I've actually been saying, oh, it'd be awesome to come back because I had a rate or somebody who's Amish, right? Just because I love that community. I love that family community. But being the person that I am, being the soul that I am, oh my goodness, I would probably be the black sheep in that colony, wouldn't I? I would stir the pot, and they really do have a good thing going, right? Those mums are teaching their daughters to sew. The fathers are showing them to be good mechanics and good farmers, good gardeners, good builders. Oh my goodness, right? It takes a village. And in that village, every person has something that they can contribute, right? But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that change because it is something, and it could have been a totally different story in my life, right? The way that it played out. But change is not always comfortable, but it's always beneficial. 100%. It's beneficial, but it takes sometimes a little bit of a boot in the butt, right? A cheerlead, a pep talk, right? Right? A threat. No dinner tonight. Okay, what do we got here? Eugene says, good night. See you later, everybody. See you tomorrow night. Guys, that's my signal. Dave, thank you so much for coming into my live. I've missed you. I haven't seen you for a little while, but yeah, super awesome. I love it because in this one I don't miss too much, right? Because I don't have the community yet here on What's My Good Cheer like I have it on Chatters Live, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're just going to keep moving in that direction, right? And you only course correct when you kind of get those feelings that you maybe have done up. Uh-oh. And I do those. I do those every once in a while, more than every once in a while. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.